Something absolutely insane is happening in the WNBA right now, and it has nothing to do with basketball scores or highlight reels. What started as a few hard fouls against rookie sensation Caitlin Clark has somehow triggered whispers of federal investigations, government inquiries, and panic in boardrooms that most fans will never hear about. Think about this for a second. When was the last time you heard about the Department of Justice even glancing at a professional sports league? It almost never happens, yet here we are with Clark's treatment on the court reaching the desks of senators and federal investigators. The craziest part? None of this happened by accident. According to industry insiders, every single elbow, every blindside hit, every cheap shot targeting Clark was being documented and cataloged behind the scenes. While fans were debating whether the hits were just tough basketball, her professional team was quietly building what looks less like sports management and more like a calculated legal war chest. The WNBA thought they were dealing with rookie hazing, but Clark's representation just transformed it into something the league may no longer be able to control. On the surface, everything looked normal. Clark stepped into the league with massive hype, record-breaking viewership, and more eyes on women's basketball than ever before. But with that spotlight came relentless punishment. Kennedy Carter blindsiding her in full view of cameras. Diamond Deshields charging in like a linebacker. Marina Mabre shoving her with hockey-level force. Even veteran Tina Charles sneaking in shots when she thought nobody would notice. These weren't isolated incidents, they became a disturbing pattern that spread across social media like wildfire. The league's response: complete silence. Not a single strong statement, not one warning that this treatment had crossed any lines. Analysts dismissed it as Clark needing to toughen up. Commentators framed it as normal rookie treatment, but compilation videos of Clark taking hit after hit began trending everywhere. Hashtags demanding her protection exploded online. Even casual viewers who never watched the W could see something wasn't right. This didn't look like tough defense anymore. It looked like one player had a target painted on her back. While most people saw this as rough basketball culture, Clark's team recognized something completely different. They saw a systematic pattern that could be weaponized into federal leverage. These weren't just casual comments about playing physical defense. Sources revealed there were strategic discussions among players, deliberate plans to send messages and establish dominance. In other words, a coordinated effort to test her, break her rhythm, and make her think twice every time she touched the ball. That revelation should have triggered immediate league investigations or at least public acknowledgement of problems. Instead, the silence only fueled suspicions that targeting Clark had become accepted culture throughout the organization. And here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. Those locker room admissions didn't stay hidden for long. Clark's professional representation network, already known as one of the most powerful in sports, was documenting absolutely everything. Every quote, every conversation, every clip wasn't just uploaded to social media. It was logged, timestamped, and stored as potential evidence in what was starting to look less like a highlight reel and more like a legal ammunition depot. But this wasn't just reactive documentation. Industry sources suggest Clark's camp anticipated this targeting from day one. They knew a player with her popularity and spotlight would face jealousy, resistance, and systematic harassment. So they built a strategy not only to protect her career, but to turn any mistreatment into devastating leverage against the league itself. While the WNBA stayed quiet, hoping the controversy would fade, Clark's team was already positioning the pieces for something much bigger than basketball drama.
If the legal implications weren't enough to terrify WNBA executives, the economic reality should absolutely destroy them. Caitlin Clark isn't just another talented rookie, she's become the single most valuable asset the league has ever witnessed, and the numbers are absolutely staggering. Since she entered the WNBA, merchandise sales have exploded by over 600%, League Pass subscriptions jumped more than 360%, ratings for games featuring Clark are doubling and tripling compared to games without her. Even ticket prices for road games skyrocket when her name appears on the schedule.
This isn't just impressive growth, it's complete financial dependency. The WNBA's entire trajectory is now tied directly to one player more than at any point in the league's history. And when that one irreplaceable player is getting blindsided, shoved, and targeted with zero protection from officials, the economic risk becomes absolutely catastrophic. Every foul Clark absorbs isn't just a threat to her physical health, it's a potential devastating blow to the league's entire financial foundation. Think about this nightmare scenario for a moment. What happens if Clark goes down with a serious injury from one of these targeting incidents? What if she misses weeks or months of play? Viewership would immediately tank. Sponsors would start asking uncomfortable questions about their investments. The momentum that took decades to build would stall overnight. The WNBA isn't just protecting a star player anymore. They're desperately trying to protect the engine driving their very survival. Clark's representation team knows this economic reality better than anyone, and insiders suggest they've already weaponized this dependency condescendency into their strategic approach. They don't need to make direct threats or demand special treatment. All they have to do is point at the financial data and say something simple but devastating. If you can't protect the player who built this unprecedented growth, you're gambling with the league's entire future. That argument becomes impossible for any rational executive to ignore. And here's what makes the situation even more explosive. Every single day, the WNBA fails to take decisive action. The pressure builds exponentially, not just from lawyers and politicians, but from sponsors, television networks, and investors who absolutely hate uncertainty in their business partnerships. These aren't people who care about basketball drama or locker room politics. They care about return on investment, and right now they're watching their most valuable asset get systematically targeted while league leadership does absolutely nothing. This financial data tells an even more disturbing story when you dig deeper. Clark's impact extends far beyond just her own games. Teams report increased season ticket sales specifically because fans want to guarantee they'll see her when she visits. Merchandise featuring her name outsells entire team rosters combined. Social media engagement for the league has reached levels that marketing executives only dreamed about just 2 years ago. She didn't just join the WNBA, she single-handedly transformed it into something that finally matters in mainstream sports culture.
But here's the terrifying reality that keeps executives awake at night. This entire economic boom rests on one person's health and happiness. If Clark gets seriously injured, retires early, or simply decides she's had enough of the targeting and hostility, the financial house of cards comes crashing down immediately. Sponsors who sign multi-year deals expecting Clark-level ratings would have legitimate grounds to renegotiate or walk away entirely. Television contracts built around her drawing power would lose most of their value overnight.
Clark's team understands this leverage better than perhaps any athlete representation in modern sports history. They don't need to threaten lawsuits or demand policy changes. The mere possibility of Clark stepping away from basketball sends shockwaves through corporate boardrooms across the country. And every day that passes without the league taking her safety seriously, that possibility becomes more realistic and more financially devastating for everyone involved. But here's the explosive part that most mainstream outlets absolutely refuse to discuss openly. The cultural dynamic sitting at the center of this entire controversy. Because Caitlin Clark isn't just any rookie stepping into the WNBA, she's a straight white woman entering a league that is predominantly black and openly LGBTQ+. On the basketball court, those demographics shouldn't matter at all. Talent should be talent, competition should be competition. But behind the scenes, those exact dynamics are fueling resentment, jealousy, and cultural tensions that have become impossible to ignore. Former WNBA star Candace Wiggins dropped bombshell revelations years ago about feeling systematically bullied out of the league, specifically for being straight. At the time, her explosive testimony was quickly dismissed and brushed off as exaggeration by league officials and media commentators. But now, watching what Clark is experiencing, people are revisiting Wiggins' warnings with completely different perspectives. Was she actually predicting the exact kind of toxic culture that now seems to be systematically targeting Clark? The evidence becomes even more damning when you examine the voting patterns. Clark absolutely shattered records, with 1.3 million fan votes for the All-Star game, more than any player in league history. The fans spoke with unprecedented clarity about who they wanted to see. But in the player-only voting, Clark ranked 9th among guards. 9th. That kind of massive disconnect isn't just about basketball talent or rookie status. Analysts like Dick Vitale called it exactly what it was: pure jealousy and cultural resistance. And jealousy in professional sports never stays harmless or contained. It transforms into hard fouls, cold shoulders, and most dangerously selective enforcement by officials who aren't operating in some neutral vacuum. Sources suggest conversations happening inside officiating circles reflect the same troubling sentiment that Clark's meteoric rise needs to be managed and controlled, and allowing more physical, aggressive play against her is part of that management strategy.
When that kind of cultural bias translates directly into selective rule enforcement during games, it stops being sports politics and becomes the textbook definition of discriminatory treatment, the kind of systematic bias that federal civil rights enforcement was specifically designed to address and eliminate. Clark's sophisticated legal representation isn't framing this as jealous players being mean to the new girl. They're strategically framing it as workplace harassment directly tied to identity, status, and cultural prejudice.
The demographic tensions become even more obvious when you look at how other rookies are treated compared to Clark's experience. Players with similar skill levels who fit the league's cultural demographics don't face anywhere near the same level of systematic targeting or physical aggression. The contrast is so stark that even casual observers can see the different standards being applied. It's not about toughing up rookies or maintaining competitive intensity. It's about sending a very specific cultural message to a very specific type of player. League executives are absolutely terrified because they understand that if this situation gets reframed as a discrimination case rather than just sports drama, it won't be judged in ESPN studios or sports talk radio shows. It will be evaluated in federal offices by investigators who specialize in workplace harassment and civil rights violations. People who don't care about basketball culture or competitive traditions but focus exclusively on whether systematic targeting occurred based on protected characteristics. The cultural element also explains why the targeting feels so coordinated and intentional. This isn't random aggression or isolated incidents of overly competitive players. Multiple sources confirm there were actual discussions about how to handle Clark's presence, how to establish that she needed to earn respect through physical punishment, and how to make sure she understood the league's unwritten cultural rules from day one. What makes this even more explosive is how the league's progressive public image clashes with these internal cultural dynamics. The WNBA markets itself as the pinnacle of inclusivity and social justice in professional sports. But if federal investigators start examining whether that progressive facade masks systematic harassment of players who don't fit the cultural mold, the damage would extend far beyond basketball. Sponsors, networks, and corporate partners who specifically chose the WNBA for its inclusive brand would face serious questions about their continued association with an organization under federal civil rights investigation. Here's the absolutely terrifying reality that nobody in any league office wants to acknowledge. If Caitlin Clark's legal team succeeds in establishing even a partial precedent here, it doesn't just affect her situation or the WNBA. It could fundamentally transform professional sports forever across every league, every level, and every sport in America. Because once one athlete successfully demonstrates that targeted treatment can be challenged as harassment or workplace discrimination, the floodgates explode open for everyone else. Think about the implications for a moment. Other rookies, veteran players, even athletes in completely different sports could start asking the exact same questions Clark is raising. If her legal team can argue that repeated physical targeting and cultural hostility crossed the line from normal competition into federal civil rights territory, what stops any athlete from making identical claims? Legal experts are already warning that precedent never stays contained within one case or one league. If Clark's representation wins even a partial victory, a settlement, a policy change, an admission of mishandling, or any acknowledgement that the league failed in its duty, it provides a detailed roadmap for every future athlete who faces similar treatment. Suddenly, that's just how the game is played stops being an acceptable defense for anything. Every questionable hit, every ignored complaint, every instance of what players claim is biased treatment becomes potential federal litigation. For the WNBA, that scenario would mean completely rewriting how the league operates. But for the NBA, NFL, NHL, and every other professional sports organization, it means preparing for athletes who see the Clark case not as sports gossip, but as a revolutionary playbook for challenging systematic mistreatment through federal channels rather than just accepting it as part of athletic culture. This is precisely why insiders suggest the league's silent strategy isn't just about protecting their public image or avoiding bad press. They're desperately trying to protect the fundamental foundation of how professional sports have operated for decades. Because if one player proves that culture, bias, and unchecked aggression can be successfully challenged in federal court rather than just endured, that precedent spreads to every locker room, every arena, and every workplace where athletes are traditionally told to stay quiet and toughen up. But here's where Clark's strategic timing becomes absolutely brilliant. She didn't stumble into this controversy accidentally or react impulsively to mistreatment. Every move, every moment of calculated silence, every carefully chosen response feels precision timed for maximum impact. The targeting incidents piled up right as her rookie season was generating record-breaking ratings and unprecedented mainstream attention. Her team stayed strategically quiet while the league fumbled their responses, allowing public frustration and outrage to build organically online. Then, just as whispers of federal interest started buzzing in political and legal circles, Clark's camp began dropping subtle but devastating hints about systematic harassment and discriminatory enforcement. They didn't rush the narrative or push too hard too fast. Instead, they let the story breathe naturally, allowing public outrage and media attention to do the heavy lifting before stepping in with legal firepower at the perfect moment. The timing matters enormously because this controversy exploded during the exact year the WNBA has been aggressively marketing itself as ready to compete with major leagues in terms of revenue, relevance, and mainstream cultural impact. League executives have been pitching the organization as the next big thing in professional sports. And right as that momentum reached its peak, Clark's situation threatens to completely unravel their carefully crafted progressive image. The contrast between glossy marketing campaigns promoting inclusivity and viral videos of their biggest star getting systematically targeted creates cognitive dissonance that sponsors, networks, and fans simply cannot ignore. Even the strategic silence from Clark's team builds incredible suspense and pressure. The longer they wait to make formal moves, the more pressure accumulates on league officials, the more mistakes get made by executives scrambling to respond, the harder media coverage becomes, the higher the stakes climb. So when her representation finally does speak publicly or file something official, the impact will hit the WNBA like an absolute tsunami. This entire situation represents something much bigger than a disagreement about basketball fouls or rookie treatment. It's a calculated chess match where Clark's team isn't playing for sympathy or special treatment. They're playing for maximum leverage at the exact moment when the league finds itself most vulnerable to systematic change. The ultimate question isn't whether Clark is just defending herself against rough treatment. The real question is whether she's deliberately setting up a completely new era where professional athletes no longer accept systematic targeting, cultural harassment, or discriminatory treatment as simply the unavoidable price of athletic success. Because if her legal strategy succeeds in establishing that precedent, this controversy doesn't end with policy changes in women's basketball. It fundamentally transforms how every professional league treats players, how every corporate sponsor manages their brand associations, and how every fan understands the line between acceptable competitive rivalry and systematic abuse that crosses into federal civil rights violation. The ripple effects wouldn't just change basketball, they would rewrite the entire power dynamic between athletes and the organizations that profit from their talent. In the end, the Caitlin Clark saga represents the collision of talent, strategic timing, legal sophistication, economic leverage, and cultural tensions with institutional power structures that have remained unchanged for generations. When those forces collide with this level of intensity and precision, the resulting explosion doesn't just change individual games or seasons, it changes the fundamental rules of how professional sports operate, and potentially how American workplace rights are enforced and protected. So the next time you see a headline about Clark taking another hard foul or facing another controversy, ask yourself this crucial question. Are you watching routine sports highlights, or are you witnessing the opening moves of a revolution that could transform professional athletics forever?